Hello and welcome back. BSA Bantam 4-speed gearbox. We're going to have a go at it, and I've looked at the available data that BSA produced on the 4-speed models, and I can see why a number of people kind of find it a little bit difficult to do. And when I say difficult to do, I think just a bit tricky, really. There's a few things I've read on the internet about the 4-speed gearbox, and that people say that it's quite tricky to do and it can be a bit of a pain to get together. So what I thought I'd do is break down the process and just do a bit of a task audit on it, really, and see if I can find a logical sequence to put in this gearbox together to make it easier to do. And then if I could do that, I'd make a video about it, and we'd do it quite slowly, step by step, so that you can pause me and go away and do the bit and then come back. And we'll kind of make it like a workshop manual in video form. So when I'm talking about the BSA data, I'm talking about this format, which is the workshop manual format. And previous to producing these kind of books, BSA used to supply service sheets. And to my mind, the service sheets were a little bit more detailed, but certainly no better at explaining the nuances of the procedures. So what do I mean by that? Well, in my career, I've written a number of technical publications and service bulletins, and the audience, the intended audience, is very important when you're writing any kind of manual or document, because you have to pitch it at the audience you're aiming for. And in my opinion, these kind of things were pitched at factory-trained mechanics or dealer-trained mechanics, and they were more of an aid memoir than a sort of how-to for the guy that's never done it before. So that can cause, difficulties, because they give you quite a lot of detail about what goes in there. But like I said, they don't really give you any detail on the nuances of how to get it in there. So anyway, that's what we're going to try and do. Hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully, for those of you that have never done one of these before, I'm sure many of you have, but for those of you that haven't, hopefully this will be helpful. So first things first, we need to make sure that we've got everything we need. We need to get everything in a condition that's ready to go back together, and we need effectively a start position, if you like. And you can see there in the gearbox area here, and this is a B175. This is Peter's B175 that I've been working on for a short while now. But it applies to any of the 4-speeders. They're all the same, so the D10s, B175s, D14-4s. If you've got one of those bikes and you want to have a crack at the gearbox, this will apply to you. So anyway, as you can see, I've got the main shaft fitted, and hopefully the camera's picking it up, but it's all the way in. It's the main shaft first gear is hard up against the bearing, so it's flush there. And we've got the main shaft third gear. I never removed this, but there's a little circlip in here that you can undo and you can remove it from the shaft. But that's fitted. Like I said, I had no reason to remove it. I just cleaned everything up because it was all pretty good when it came apart. So that's all fitted. It's a normal bearing fit, like sort of a slight transition fit. And you do need to give it a little bit of a tap sometimes to get it through. But I would caution against hitting it with anything hard. You want something like a plastic hammer or a hide-faced hammer, just to persuade it through and not burr over the end. Otherwise, you'll have problems when you come to fit the other side of the crankcases with the bush in it. You'll have problems with it going into the bush. So that's fitted in there. We've got the shift fork shaft, which is quite a mouthful, isn't it? Say that after a couple of sherbets. Shift fork shaft fitted. There's a circlip at the bottom end to stop it going all the way through, and that just pushes into the bore in the casing, just flush against the circlip, so that's in. Again, it's a reasonable fit, but it should go in without too much persuasion, because again, you don't want to bear up the top. And then over here, just peeking out behind, hopefully the camera's picking it up, we've got the detent spring, we've got the spring cap, which is like a top hat type affair, which sits inside the spring and forms a seat for the ball. And then we've got the ball as well, the detent ball. And that's all retained with a blob of grease. It doesn't need a lot. You don't want an awful lot of grease inside your gearbox. And once it's all assembled, I'll be washing the grease out with some aerosol solvent, because we've got a wet clutch that shares the lubrication with the gearbox, and it's not meant to have grease on it, basically. I don't know to what level it would be detrimental, or whether it would even be detrimental at all. But grease isn't supposed to be in there, so we will wash it out as best we can, and I think that will be fine. But the ball's quite, with a blob of grease, it sits there quite happily, so you don't need to worry too much about it dropping out. It just seems to sit in the cup quite happily. So there we go. Obviously the bushes are fitted. We've got our a bush in this side of the case, and then on this side of the case, we've got a bush. All our oil seals are fitted into the cases, ready to go together. And that's pretty much it, really. So let's have a look at the parts that are going to go in there and form the gearbox, and let's have a look at what we need to do to get them ready to go in there. Right, next step then, naming of the parts. And anybody that's done any military service will remember that from their basic training, naming of the parts. But it's a gearbox, not a Bren gun, so let's carry on. So the first thing that we need to concern ourselves with is the lay shaft first gear, and this goes in first when we're building the gearbox, identifiable by the 5 sort of double drillings in the upper face. It goes that way up in the gearbox. The other side is just plain, and these are to engage the dogs on the lay shaft third gear that sits on top of it, which is the sliding gear. And yeah, fairly easy to recognize. Everything's nice and clean. If you've had it on the wire wheel, make sure there's no bits of stray wire strands. Make sure the teeth are in good condition, which on this one they are. Slight little tiny blemish on that tooth there, but certainly nothing that's going to give us any issues. So that's the first thing we need to look at. The next thing are the sliding pinions, which is the lay shaft third and the main shaft second gear, and they are slightly different, and it's important not to get them mixed up. One is slightly larger than the other. The main shaft sliding pinion is 1 tooth larger than the lay shaft. You can see this one is physically slightly larger in diameter. Another distinguishing factor is on the main shaft gear. Hopefully you can see it. We have these lines milled into the dogs. So that indicates that it's the main shaft gear, and the lay shaft gear doesn't have them. We also have these slots, selector slots, and this is what the selector forks will work on. There's one here as well on the main shaft gear, and there's a peculiarity of how they fit. On the lay shaft, it fits that way up with the slot facing towards us, up the way, and then on the main shaft it fits that way with the slot facing down away from us. And there's a peculiar reason for that, which we'll come across once we start assembling it. So let's have a look at the shift forks. So we've got the lay shaft shift fork, connects like that, fits together like that. I'm just making sure my hands aren't in the way. And with the slot facing up the way, the shift fork points down like that into the gearbox, so it points towards the bench. And then we have our selector pin here, and there's a roller that fits on here, and then this engages into the cam plate, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But orientation wise, slot facing up and fork, excuse me, fork arm, if you want to call it that, facing down. So that's how they go together. The opposite is true on the main shaft. Slot faces down, fork engages, and then the fork arm or body faces up the way. And there's the, again, selector pin, and the roller goes on here. So let's have a quick look at the rollers. Quite unremarkable. Nearly dropped it. There you go. Quite small little things. Just two little collars that go over the shift pins and just give a bearing surface, if you like. Just increase the diameter and provide a rolling element to the selector pin, so that it isn't just a friction, a friction drive. There's actually some movement there. So that's our rollers. Then let's have a look at our cam plate assembly. And there's three parts to the cam plate assembly. We've got the cam plate itself. Let me just break it down for you. Cam plate itself, which has got a fixed gear with a shaft on it, various holes, various indents on the side, and these correspond to the various gearbox positions. So we've got first gear here, we've got neutral, we've got second gear, we've got third gear, and we've got fourth gear. We've got two holes here at the top, and we've got three holes here at the bottom. And I say the bottom because that's the way it fits into the gearbox with the gearbox case in this orientation. So it fits in like that with those three holes down towards the bench. So on the back, we've got this toothed element, this pinion, if you like, which is fixed to the cam plate. And if we turn it to the side like that, let me just zoom you in a little bit. You might be able to make it out, I'm not entirely sure. There's a little sort of center punch mark right there. And when you're assembling all the pieces together, you take the moving element with the internal teeth, like that, with the shaft sticking out towards you. You get the center tooth in line with that center punch mark. Now, this detent at the back, so you've got the curve at the front, you've got the detents running around the back, this central detent here, which remember, first, neutral, second, third, so it's the third gear detent, is pointing away to the right. You want to have the hole and this pin in line with that detent. So if you drew a line through them, they'd line up like that. Then you have the mounting bracket, is what I call it. I'm not entirely sure if that's the right name for it, but that's what I call it. The mounting bracket sits over the top like this, kind of ties everything together. And then this protrusion here, which is for the shift spring, this protrusion here points towards this castellation here. You've got three castellations, 1, 2, 3, and basically the center castellation and this protrusion on the mounting bracket pretty much line up. And that's it, you're in the start position, ready to assemble. So that's the cam plate dealt with. Right, moving on. We have our lay shaft. Here's our lay shaft here. And the lay shaft has top gear, which is fixed, doesn't come off. And it's got second gear, which does come off. There's a little circlip in there, holding it on. So if you remove that circlip, you can withdraw the gear if it's damaged or if there's any gunge in there. I haven't removed it, didn't need to. perfectly smooth. It's all been washed and re-lubricated, a little film of oil. No damage to the teeth, and no damage to the journals on either end of the shaft. A little bit polished from obviously being used, but nothing that you can feel. Perfectly serviceable. So that's our lay shaft. Then we have our main shaft top gear, which is sometimes called the sleeve gear because it's effectively a sleeve. You've got two bushes in here, one at this end, one at this end. They need to be in good condition. You don't want any headache on your main shaft. All the teeth in good condition. This is where the sprocket mounts on the outside of the, once you've got the casings on and you fit your sprocket, this is where it goes. Left-hand thread, looks in good condition. Little bit of oxidation staining, but it's all been across the wire wheel. So not going to give us any problems. Not excessive wear where it fits in the bearing. No burrs. And similar sort of double drillings look there to engage with main shaft second and lock into place. So, you know, all in good condition, and just fit that check that it spins quite nicely on your main shaft and it doesn't rock about on the bushes. That's ready to go back. And then the last pieces of the puzzle are the gear change shaft, complete with spring. And it's advisable to change that spring whilst you've got this apart, because if it breaks, you have to split the cases again. If you don't know the provenance of it, or it's, you know, you think it's done quite a few miles, good idea to change it, because yeah, it'd be frustrating, wouldn't it, if you had to crack open the gearbox again because the spring broke after a short period of time. So you've got the gear change shaft. Then there's a spacer, fits on the end there, up against the spring. That's important because that checks the end float, stops it from jumping out of engagement. You've got selector claw, which does the work when you put your foot on the foot pedal. So this needs to be in good condition. No burrs, no bits missing. And if you hold it like this in your hand and the jaws are sloping away from you, that's the way that it goes. So it goes like that when we fit it. So that is the upper side as viewed from the top, and then the lower side is with the jaws pointing towards you. So if you can see the bevels and you can see the jaws pointing away from you, that's the way that we fit it. And then last but not least, small compression spring that fits on top of the selector claw, and when you put the casing on, the other casing on, that just sets that end float, sets that preload, so that your gear change shaft doesn't wander around in the casings, and also so that it isn't over tensioned, and you don't get a stiff gear change mechanism. And then I said that was the last piece, but really these are the last pieces. Two securing bolts for the cam plate mechanism with their respective tab washers to stop them from coming undone, because obviously if the cam plate fell out while you were riding, you'd have a bit of a bad day. So you need those tab washers. So that's all the parts, and now we can make a start on getting the thing together and seeing how it goes. Right, off we go then. Let's make a start. And first thing we talked about, first component we talked about, is the first piece to go in, and that is lay shaft first gear. So that just sits over the lay shaft bush. Just engage it with the main shaft, and there we go. Just sits in there. Second piece to go in, and we need to disconnect it from the shift fork is the lay shaft third gear, and or sliding pinion. And we make sure we've got the right one. It's the smaller of the two pinions, and it's got no milled slots on the dogs, so we know it's the right one. And that fits in with these 5 dogs on the bottom, drops into lay shaft first. And it should just engage and drop in like that. And everything's just kind of roughly centered over the lay shaft bush. Right, this is where we kind of diverge slightly, because the next piece to go in now is the cam plate assembly. So we grab our previously prepared cam plate, recalling that we're going to fit it with the 3 holes facing down. So it's going to go in like that. So at the moment, the mounting bracket is in the wrong position, so we're going to rotate that round like that. It comes up against a hard stop, and if we look at it, we've got our 3 castellations and our protrusion on the mounting bracket. Excuse me, can't get my words out. The protrusion on the mounting bracket is just slightly, it's sticking straight up, and then it's slightly to the right of the castellations. So they're over to the left slightly. Right. So 3 holes to the bottom, and then the first gear detent, which is this one here, there's a neutral. This is the first gear detent. This is going to engage with the detent ball. So we're going to lower it in. This is going to be quite tricky for you to see, but I'm going to try and keep my hands out of the way. We're going to lower it into position, like that. Find the detent ball, which is there. Drop the first gear detent onto it. You can just test it against the spring pressure to make sure the ball is seated properly. And that is it. We're not going to put the bolts in. We're going to leave it loosely in there, because that's going to really help us to do the rest of the assembly. But that's nicely snug against that ball. It's in the detent, and obviously the spring pressure is pushing it this way slightly, but that's fine. That's not a problem. So that's in there. Right. What do we need next? Well, the next thing we need is the lay shaft selector fork and roller. So here it is, pointing down the way. We're going to put a little smear of grease on here just to retain the roller, but not a lot. Doesn't need much. And a little bit like that. And then let's put the roller on. And the rollers are identical, but when you strip a gearbox down, it's a good idea to note which one came from where. But if they're new parts, then obviously you don't need to worry about it. So that's sufficiently stuck with a blob of grease. And I'm not entirely sure, but I think this might be where people struggle. Because if you try to get that down past the cam plate in the orientation that it's going to go in, and try and sort of wiggle the cam plate out of the way, there's every possibility that you'll knock the roller off, and it'll end up in the bottom of the gearbox. Right. So if we think of the rear of the engine as outboard, we think of the front of the engine as inboard, or whatever analogies you want to use. I use outboard and inboard because I'm an aircraft guy, but that's just how I think. So what we're going to do is we're going to engage the selector fork onto the shaft, and then we're going to turn it inboard until it's effectively pointing towards the top of the engine. It's pointing over there. And we're going to lower it down and it will go all the way down past the main shaft with the roller still fitted. And then when we get it to the point that it sits on top of the lay shaft third gear, which is obviously what we want to engage it with, we're going to just wiggle the lay shaft third out slightly, let it drop, and then we're going to turn it outboard. And as we turn it outboard, we're just going to wiggle the cam plate slightly. And it's in. And now you can see that the lay shaft third gear is floating slightly above the lay shaft first gear because it's in the slot. And down here, the roller has engaged with the cam plate. But it was that action of lowering it down with the roller pointing up the way, lowering it down, letting it rest on top of the third gear pinion, and then just wiggling it into the slot and turning it outboard so that it effectively rotates into position on the cam plate. And that's in now. So that's the first bit out the way. So the next thing we're going to do is to fit the main shaft second gear and its respective selector fork. So we'll do that next. Well, I've moved you. You're off the overhead mount now and you're magnetised to the engine stand because I think this bit would be helpful to see in a more zoomed in view. So that's what we're going to do. So the next thing to fit is the main shaft second, which is the sliding pinion, and that has the milled slots in the dogs, as you can see. You'll recall it gets fitted with the slot facing down, and the selector fork gets fitted facing with the arm of the selector fork facing up. Again, we've used some grease to adhere the roller in position, and this thing gets fitted as an assembly, as opposed to the one on the lay shaft that gets fitted as individual components. So we're going to lower the pinion over the main shaft and the selector fork over the selector shaft. And then we come up against a bit of a natural stop. Let me just move you up a little bit so that you can see. There we go. That's better, isn't it? So here is our selector fork. It's not quite resting on top of the cam plate, but it isn't far off. We need to engage the splines here on the pinion and the main shaft so that that's ready to lower down, which it is. So that's now lowered onto the main shaft, but the cam plate mechanism is in the way of getting the selector fork into position. So all we're going to do is we're going to hold on to the pinion and the selector fork with one hand. We're going to rock the cam plate outboard slightly, lower down the fork, and then we're going to bring the cam plate back into position, rock it forward again, and allow the selector fork roller to engage with the cam plate slot. And there we go. You can see, well, you probably can't see, let me lower you down slightly. When we did that, the lay shaft pinion dropped out of engagement slightly. Let's get that back in. Dropped out of engagement slightly, but we can just soon put that back on like that. So now we've got both of our selector forks into position. We've got our cam plate in the right place, and we can loosely fit our cam plate securing bolts to stop everything from falling apart and doing all the good work we've done. So we'll just get them started like that. We'll get the other one in. You might not be able to see it. I've just pushing the cam plate against spring pressure, just lining up the holes, and that's our 2 cam plate bolts started. And what I'll do is I'll take you on a bit of a handheld adventure around the gearbox so that you can see everything that we've done so far. Okay, so before we fit the final pieces, we'll go on a wobbly handheld tour of what we've done so far. I get my light just in case we need it, and I can use it to point at things. So there we have the rear view of the cam plate, and there's the protrusion, or the lug if you like, on the mounting bracket. The 2 mounting bolts, they're not fully tightened up. There's still some little bit of wiggle on the cam plate so that we can test and adjust the fit of the selector claw later on. The 3 castellations that actually do the gear shift hard work when you press the foot pedal, they're slightly to the left of the let me just move you so you can see a bit better. There you go. Slightly to the left of the lug on the mounting bracket, and then coming round, we've got lay shaft first gear pinion down there in the bottom. First part that we fitted, and then on top of that we've got lay shaft third with the selector fork. It's just sort of floating slightly above the first gear pinion in the selector fork. Selector fork body going down the way there, you can just see it engaging with the cam plate at the bottom. And then on the main shaft, we've got main shaft third gear there. That's the one that's fitted with a circlip and was never removed. We have main shaft second, which is our sliding pinion with the grooves milled into the dogs, which actually identifies it as the main shaft pinion. We've got the selector fork pointing up the way this time, and then if we come round, try and get you a view of how it interfaces with the cam plate. There we go. There it is. The better view there. You can just see it there engaging with the cam plate. The roller is inside there, and that's pretty much it. That is the story so far. So I'll get you back up on the camera mount and we'll complete the job. Right, last few elements to go then. We're nearly there, and the next thing to go in is the lay shaft itself. We've got lay shaft second gear pinion with the circlip securing it. I haven't removed this, I didn't have to, but you know, if you've had to change that pinion, you may have had to remove that. But it's all nicely cleaned, lightly oiled, ready to go. And there's our lay shaft top gear pinion, which is an integral part of the shaft. So if you've got any broken teeth or anything on that, you'll have to change the lay shaft itself. So as I say, lightly oiled, ready to go in. And we're just going to feed that down through the lay shaft third gear pinion. Just pick up the splines, and we may have to just give things a little bit of a tickle just to ease it through. There we go. That's all the way through. Have a feel underneath. We can feel it protruding through the bush, so we know it's down, and it seems to be turning nice and smoothly. So next component, main shaft top gear pinion, sleeve gear with the provision for the final drive sprocket. Again, cleaned, lightly oiled. We've already checked that the two bushes are in good condition, and there's no broken teeth or anything like that. So we're ready to fit that. We can lower that over the main shaft and just pick up the lay shaft engagement. And if we reach down and turn the main shaft, everything should revolve nice and smoothly. If it doesn't, you need to retrace your steps and just see what's causing the bind up. And similarly here, with your two top gear pinions, you should have a pretty much a level surface. There shouldn't be a marked step here. There's a slight step, but nothing, you know, the scriber slides over the two pinions quite easily. If you have got a step there, again, you need to retrace your steps and just see what isn't sitting down properly. We did make sure that the main shaft was all the way through the bearing. We have checked that the lay shaft is protruding through the bush underneath. So, in this case, we've got no problem. But if you do have a step there, you do have a problem, you're just going to have to go back a few steps and just see what's going on. And then, just pick up from where you left off, really. But they turn nice and smoothly. So the next thing to do is to fit the gear change mechanism, which is the last piece of the puzzle. Here's the gear change shaft. There's a spring fitted. You can see that it's either side of that lug there. And these two ends of the spring fits either side of the protrusion, the lug on the cam plate bracket, and that's what gives you your spring return on your pedal movement. Now this spring, not very expensive, easy to replace, and if you're not sure of the provenance of the spring, whilst you've got the cases apart, it's a good idea to change it, because it would be heartbreaking, I think, if you just done a gearbox rebuild and the spring broke a few miles down the road. It means you've got to split the cases again to get to it. And so, a bit of a waste of effort, really. So, yeah, good counsel, I think, to change it now. We've got a spacer that goes on. It fits over that boss there. Goes a little bit on the wonk. You can see it's a little bit crooked, but once everything's bolted together, it'll even itself up. And you'll recall that we hadn't quite tightened up the cam plate mounting bolts. They're not nipped right down. And this is where we're going to test the engagement of the selector claw. So we've just dropped that in, nice and flush on our spacer. Spring, two sides of the spring, either side of the cam plate mounting bracket, and then selector claw, beveled face up, claws pointing away from us, and we're just going to drop that over the top and make sure that it engages with the movable portion of the cam plate. It engages with the castellation there, and that's nice. That will move that under pedal travel, so that's in a good position. So now we can just pull that mechanism out again. We can have a final nip on our mounting bolts. Just tighten them up. Don't need to go bananas. And if you were really confident, now is the point that you would fold up your lock tabs. But you might want to have a dry run. So let's talk about that. Drop this back in. There it is. It's all the way in. Space is all the way down. Selector claw is engaged. That's where our compression spring goes. That goes on top of there. And as I say, at this point, you might want to have a dry run. So you kick the camera. No, that's just me. You get your other case, lubricate your oil seals. Don't forget the one on the inside. Put some oil on that. And look, there's the Bantam. The way that the Bantam crankshaft oil seal goes, facing out the way. And lubricate up your oil seals, and then just gently lower your casing over. Put some screws in, tighten them up, and then you'll fit your pedal, gear change pedal, and then by rotating your main shaft so you've got some movement on your gears, you can run up and down the gears, make sure they're all selectable, and if they are, you can take your casing off, give everything a good clean, get some gasket sealant on, because metal to metal on a Bantam, so you don't want crankcase compression leaks, you don't want gearbox oil leaks, so you can use something like Well Seal, or whatever your favourite gasket sealant is. Get something on there, and then final assembly with your outer case. Get your screws in, and that's your job done. Not forgetting, of course, to bend up your lock tabs when your casing's apart. So that's it, really. That is the gearbox rebuild. For those of you that have been following my series on this engine, this is Peters B175. I'm going to run through the gears. I'll bend my lock tabs up. I'm going to get some gasket sealant on, as I mentioned, and then we'll get the cases together. And the next time you see it, we'll be working on the primary side, because I don't think there's you've all seen me put gasket sealant on before, so not too much value in watching me do that, I don't think. So yeah, we'll get on with the primary side in the next video, and hopefully by that time we'll have a shiny new exciting ignition system to fit as well. If you've just come along to watch the gearbox rebuild, then thank you very much indeed, and I wish you all the best with your own rebuild. I hope that this has been helpful to you. Those of you that subscribe to the channel, thank you very much. Hugely appreciated, and thanks for turning up each time and supporting me. And those of you who are not yet subscribed, please do consider hitting the subscribe, ringing the bell, and do leave me a like and a comment if you've enjoyed what you've seen. So that's pretty much it then. Mind how you go, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.